Hi, I'm Scott McLean from TranceMusicMastery.com. In this video, I will show you how Adam Sabo created a lead sound like the one heard in Between the Rays original mix by Orjan Nilsen. And the sound that Adam created sounds like this. Okay, and let's go ahead and look at the MIDI clip real quick. It's an interesting lead sequence. It's based on G, and it's pretty much these sustained notes. So I'll just call those off. G, and then up to F, and then to G, and then down to D, D sharp, back to D, and then all along here it's holding, or it's using G, so it's based on G for the majority of the sequence. And then on the top line, G, D sharp, D, F, D, C, and then there's an A sharp and an F down here at the bottom before it repeats. So I'll just play through it with the sequence. Okay, and let's go ahead and walk through the sound map. And Adam Sabo says two sounds combined into one, a square and a detuned saw sound. Both have vibrato to make them better suited for lead sounds. So oscillator 1 is a dual square wave, and oscillator 2 is an 11 stacked saw wave. Envelope 2 is used to modulate oscillator 2 volume with zero attack, fast decay, sustain at 63.5%, and a fast release. Each oscillator flows into its own amplifier, with envelope 1 modulating the volume of both amplifier 1 and 2, with zero attack, fast decay, sustain at 89%, and a fast release. And then each of the amplifier outputs flow into its own EQ, EQ1 and EQ2. EQ1 is set up to have a low shelf minus 8.5 dB cut near 190 Hz, a bandpass plus 7 dB boost near 650 Hz, and a bandpass plus 8.5 dB boost near 2.2 kHz, and then a high shelf plus 0.5 dB boost near 5.5 kHz. And EQ2 is set up to have a low shelf minus 14 dB cut near 150 Hz, a bandpass plus 2.5 dB boost near 900 Hz, and a bandpass plus 3.5 dB boost near 5 kHz. The output of EQ1 and EQ2 are mixed together and flow into a filter. This is a low-pass 12 dB per octave slope filter. The output of that flows into a reverb with approximately a 3-second reverb tail and low dampening for bright reverb, and then it flows into the main output. Okay, let's build this patch. Okay, so we're starting from the initialized patch. Let me go ahead and play that briefly. Okay, so we have a saw wave. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is set the global tune to 0. That brings it up 1 octave. And next we're going to configure oscillator 1. Okay, so we're going to make sure that oscillator 1 is set to crisp, and then also set normalize to 10. This will bring up the wave level somewhat, and depending on what initialized patch you're using, that may already be at 10. Just verify that it is, and if not, just set it to 10. And next we're going to set the voices to dual, enable the invert switch. This enables pulse width, and let's increase the pulse width to 50. And we want to go ahead and set the tune to 12. That pitches it up 1 octave. Next, we're going to detune these dual waves from one another, setting detune to 5. And then set the volume to 120. And set width to 80. So next we want to add some modulation to the pitch, and we're going to use LFO1 and set the amount to 1.0. And then now let's set up LFO1, setting it sync time to 1/16 dot, and then bringing the amp down to 22. And then set the delay to 30. This will delay when that LFO takes effect. Okay, next we want to add oscillator 2. Set its voices to 11. And we're going to leave tune at 0, but we are going to modulate that using LFO1. Okay, we want to now set the LFO amount to 2.0. And set the detune to 11. And for this one, we are going to set the phase to 50. And then for the volume, this is actually interesting. We're going to set the volume to 0 and modulate it using ENV2, and setting the ENV2 amount to 80. And set the mixer width to 100. And we need to make a routing adjustment for oscillator 2. We actually want to have it in its own lane, so I'm going to move it over here. And right now it will sound the same. Okay, but the next step will actually cause some differences. So what we want to do is route oscillator 2 to bus 1. If I go over to global. So now what's happening, oscillator 1 is going to come down here. It's routed to the main, so it's going to go through this lane in the effects buses. And then for bus 1, that's going to come down here. Now, I want to put EQ1 on the main effects bus and EQ2 on bus 1 here. And so now what's happening is oscillator 2 is going to be EQ'd by EQ2, and oscillator 1 will be EQ'd by EQ1. So oscillator 2 is now flowing into bus 1, which means it's routed into EQ2, and the return one right now is at 0, so we don't actually hear oscillator 2 anymore. So let me play that. Alright, so let's go ahead and configure just oscillator 1 right now, its EQ settings. So all we hear right now is oscillator 1, and we'll deal with oscillator 2 in a moment. So for EQ1, what we're going to do is apply a minus 8.5 dB cut just above 175 Hertz. And we want to increase the resonance to 96. That's going to sharpen the angle of this slope between the shelf and the rest of the EQ curve. Alright, so next we're going to take filter 2 and apply a 7 dB boost just above 550 Hz, probably close to 650 in that range. And lower the resonance, which will broaden the bandwidth, lowering the resonance to 15. And then for oscillator 3, we're going to apply an 8.5 dB boost above 1.75 kilohertz. And lower the resonance to 9.0. And then filter 4, apply plus 0.5 dB boost at 5.5 kilohertz. Okay, that takes care of EQ on oscillator 1. I'm going to mute oscillator 1 for a moment and bring up the return 1 level so we can hear what's coming from oscillator 2 through EQ 2. And we're going to EQ oscillator 2 next. So we want to apply a minus 14 dB cut just below 175 Hertz. And increase the resonance to 87. Next, take filter 2. We're going to apply a plus 2.5 dB boost just below 1 kilohertz. And lower the resonance to 10. And then for filter 3, apply a plus 3.5 dB boost just below 5.5 kilohertz. Lower resonance to 8. And finally, for filter 4, we're going to leave the gain at 0 and the resonance where it defaults to, which is 25, but we're going to position it right around 3 kilohertz. Okay, next we're going to mix in the output of EQ2 in with the output of EQ1 by adding a mix 5 here. Right click on it and set the sidechain input to 2 so that taps into the output of EQ2, and then bring the return 1 down to 0 now. So now what's happening is oscillator 2 flows into EQ2, and then the output of that is brought over to mix 5 and mixed in with EQ1, the output of EQ1. So let me unmute oscillator 1, and so now we have the following sound. Okay, so next we need to set up the envelopes. So first I'll work with envelope 1, set that to 21, set the decay to 21, the sustain to 89, the release to 0, and the velocity to 0. And for envelope 2, which is modulating the volume on oscillator 2, so to help us hear that more clearly, I'm going to mute lane 1 for a moment. And for envelope 2, we want to set the decay time to 18, the sustain level to 63.5, the release to 0, and the velocity to 0. Okay, that takes care of the envelopes. Now I will unmute lane 1. So now we have this result. Okay, so next we want to add a filter, and we'll do that after mix 5. So down here add VCF5. Set the filter type to LP12dB, and that's the only change that we're going to make on this. So now it sounds like this. So with the cutoff at 150, it's not really evident what type of change that's making, but it does allow us, for performance reasons, or if we wanted to automate the filter cutoff in a track that we were going to produce with this patch, we could do that through this filter cutoff here. So let me go ahead and simulate that by bringing the cutoff all the way down to 0 and then just sweeping it up. Okay, next we want to add some reverb, and for this we're going to set the dry to 87 and the wet to 60. And then to help the individual notes come through the reverb, we're going to add some pre-delay, setting pre-delay to 24. Set range to 62 and feedback to 52.5, so that'll increase the size of the reverb a bit. And then help tame some of the high end on the reverb, we're going to increase the dampening slightly to 5.5. Set the speed to 51.5 and the modulation to 31. And for the diffusion network, we're going to use D range at 50, D feedback, set that to 50, D mix, we're going to bring that down to 80, D speed, set that to 100, and then leave D mod at 50. Okay, and finally, just to make a level adjustment, setting output to 60 and master, setting that to 97. And that's the patch. I'll see you in the next video.